6 o'clock. So welcome to the council offices here at South Ribble for this meeting of the Shared Services Committee on Tuesday the 13th of January. Happy New Year. Some housekeeping rules. We don't have any fire alarm planned, so if it does sound, please leave by the emergency exits behind me. Can I ask that we switch mobile phones off, or at least put them to silent for those who can't bear the idea of switching the phone off. Members of the committee are attending in person here at the Civic Centre with officers. I notice we've got a member on line 2. We've still got a couple of members to join us, at least one of whom is already in the building, so I'm sure they'll be with us shortly. Please note this meeting is recorded and is going live, being streamed on YouTube. The web link for this can be found on the council's website. Members on Teams are asked to use the raise hand function and to keep the microphone on mute, and only unmute when they're invited to speak. Okay, so we'll move on to the agenda. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, I've got apologies from Councillor Jackie Alty.
Thank you. And we'll move swiftly on then. Declarations of interest. Remind members of the normal requirement to declare any interest that they may have, especially if it's a pecuniary interest, at the appropriate time. No one is indicating, so we'll move on to minutes of the last meeting. I actually have 2 sets of minutes for approval. Can I ask members if they agree that they are a fair and accurate record? Councillor Mrs Smith. Yes.
Thank you. On the minutes of the shared services 17th of June, Councillor Mrs France gave her apologies, but apparently she was also here. So.
Well done, Councillor France. That's noted. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. That one amendment being agreed. Councillor Smith, yeah. We're happy then to propose the 2 sets of minutes, and I will sign those off. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, item number 5. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on the recently implemented shared services, which includes economic development, building control and shared compliance. I'll just start quickly with a brief overview around economic development. So the committee agreed to move to a fully shared service. If you remember from the last meeting, we already had a shared head of service and 2 separate teams across the different councils, but we've moved now to a fully shared service, which was implemented the 1st of October. The original deadline was July, but we obviously did staff consultation and we did make some changes to the structure in response to that staff consultation, which included the establishment of 2 manager posts, primarily to focus on economic strategy, but also for a manager to oversee the delivery side of things. We did the recruitment internally, so all the posts came from the existing team, and they are now obviously working together. And just in terms of some sort of early positive outcomes, obviously it has created more capacity in the service to focus on that strategic stuff. So looking at refreshing the economic strategy, creating wider partnerships, so establishment of an economic partnership, and looking at some shared frameworks as well around employment and skills and community wealth. There's obviously that sharing of knowledge, and we've identified opportunities to reduce duplication of work, so running joint business events and establishing joint processes. So obviously the work will continue to embed that share service, obviously being established only just in October. It has realised some financial savings, so £47,000 for South Ribble. And the intention is to bring a further update to the next committee meeting in June, so we can update on further progress with the embedding of that shared service. Shared compliance, so that team was implemented in June.
I wonder if, can we just pause there to see if there's any questions or comments on that section? and then we can move on whilst it's still fresh in our minds. Anybody want to raise anything? Michelle?
Thank you. Thanks for this. It's great to see progress, and there's quite a lot of detail in the report. I just wondered how it was feeling for the staff currently, so I think that bit hasn't been touched upon. And we know change can be difficult sometimes.
To be honest, the staff have really embraced it. They see it as a really positive change. The head of service has been doing a lot of work to, focus on team building and to really sort of like build that shared culture. I think they are really finding it helpful to share knowledge and to identify those ways of sort of like reducing that duplication and doing things in different ways. So yeah, I would say that actually the change has really been embraced, and it's been really positive, and they are working together in the same location, so they come together on specific days at both Chorley and South Ribble, and it's really working well. So yeah.
Okay, Karen, so I beg your pardon, Councillor Mrs Walton.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is on item 9, where it says an economic partnership is established, and you said it has been. Could you give us a little bit more background of who this economic partnership is with?
Yes, so the economic partnership has now been established. It's a shared partnership across Chorley and South Ribble. It involves key stakeholders, local businesses across the two geographies, the college, universities, so those stakeholders who obviously have got a key interest really in economic development. We first met on the 2nd of December, I think it was, and we're due to meet again next week. We've appointed an independent chair from the university who will be chairing the meetings. From our first discussion, it was really positive. It was certainly welcomed by our partners, and they had a really good conversation about what are some of the challenges and what are some of the barriers to economic development and growth, and some of the areas we wanted to focus on, particularly around sort of employment and skills, supporting young people, and there was a proposal around maybe looking at some sort of like separate groups to kind of like work on those specific areas, but we'll have a further discussion at the next meeting next week around that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. If you want to move on to
Councillor Sutton.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Councillor Southern, I missed your hand. Welcome.
All right, there's two of them here, Matt. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick shout out on the shared services side, particularly on the building control. Shout out for Neil Hall and his team who've done an excellent job with particularly the HMO and Article 4 we've been doing. Particularly Mick down there at South Ribble, who's done quite a bit of work on the amenity side, which I've had a bit of input with. The only caveat I would say on that one there, looking at it, I think we need some more resource in there, but hats off, good job, guys. Thank you. Okay, well, that came as a bit of a surprise. I thought we were talking about something else, but your comments are most welcome, Councillor Southern. Thank you. Shall we move on now to the shared compliance and enforcement?
Yes, so just in terms of the shared compliance team, this was implemented in June 2025, covering planning enforcement, SIL and Section 106 processes. All the posts in the service site have been recruited to, so we are fully staffed. Yeah, there's currently an experienced consultant who's currently working in that team, who's going to stay on for another 12 months just to help with embedding the new service. And then just, do you want to stop there if there's any questions?
Okay, further questions on that section? Councillor Mrs Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you tell me what sort of hours we now have with the enforcement officer? Is he working full time? And what hours are the other staff working? Because at some point we've had either just a few half days or something. Enforcement's a very difficult area, I know, but we do need to have a full complement of people actually working there. If you could just give us some sort of idea of the workforce.
I will need to get back into make sure I'm not entirely making up. I was just doing a quick tally in my head. So actually, both councils, interestingly, pre-shared services have been relying upon the same enforcement consultant, who is generally very good, but is only available for a certain amount of time. He is still around, and in part that is less now to do with his capacity and more to do with his skills and advice and being able to help to support other staff that we've got. I think across the two councils we've got now somewhere in the region of around about 5 FTE, but obviously it covers a wider function because it also includes section 106 and SIL, but if members are comfortable we'll come back and confirm the exact
Yeah,
numbers.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that'd be useful. Thank you. Anybody else before Wes? Councillor Roberts.
Thanks, Councillor Summerson. No, I just wanted to draw out one of the real successes of shared services, which is in the report around kind of investing in staff and investing in local community. So I was glad to see that 2 of the vacancies that have been filled, one was from someone who'd previously done a T-level placement at the college, at the council, and then one that had previously done an apprenticeship at the council as well. So it's just really, really good success story. So nice to see it in the report.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, anybody else before we move on? Caroline.
Obviously, like within the building control service, we did have a member of staff retire, and that role has been filled through internal recruitment, and the manager has obviously gone through that training and development and done an apprenticeship with the council, and has obviously been successful in moving into a more senior position. In addition, we've also appointed a new senior building control surveyor. There is currently an agency building control surveyor like within the team, but in terms of next steps, I'm told that we are looking at creating more career graded roles in the service. It's no secret obviously that there's been challenges around recruitment in this area, particularly with a sort of like smaller pool of skilled people, and also competition with the private sector. So there's a real commitment in the service to like grow our own talent and really create those like career graded roles. And as people train, they will have the opportunity like to move up into those more senior jobs. So I think that's a really like positive outcome for building control.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. Any comments on that section? Councillor Southern.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just again to pick up on that point, Chair, vis-a-vis resource within building control. Again, on the HMO side, but particularly we've been doing a lot of work at Chorley on this. I know this is coming down the line in South Ribble. If we're going to be enforcing this Article 4, we're going to want inspection and we're going to want oversight on this one there. It is going to have more resource in it.
Okay, I think it's something we'll certainly need to keep an eye on as that work either does or doesn't materialise. But yeah, you make a good point. Thank you. Okay, let's start talking about the future.
Yeah, so I mean, the report obviously also outlines the services that are not currently shared. So street scene, waste, public protection and environmental health, communities and housing, some other services in planning enforcement, so sort of planning policy, licensing, spatial planning, and parks and open spaces. But at the last meeting of the committee in June, it was agreed that given the current climate, that we would sort of pause really on shared services and expanding shared services at this time, unless an opportunity did arise that we felt would really bring like significant savings like our improvement. So yeah, those are the current services not currently shared, but that's where
okay, and I think that remains a sensible place to be in, where should an opportunity really present itself, then we really ought to consider it. But in the meantime, thinking about where we are in the local government landscape and the journey we've already been on, that perhaps it's not the time to actively seek things just for the sake of it. Okay, so thank you for that. We're asked to note the update and consider the future development of sharing, which I think we've just done. So we'll move on to agenda item 6.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this report is relating to the shared services reporting process. So there was a performance workshop that was held with committee members back in October to discuss future reporting arrangements and objective setting. And this report sets out a proposed approach based on those discussions that were had. And the idea is that the new process will complement the existing work that is undertaken at each council's audit and governance and overview and scrutiny functions to try and avoid some of that duplication of monitoring activities. The process is outlined at point 11 in the report as a cyclical process which will commence in May each year. The idea is that it will be aligned, as I said, with the work setting processes for those existing council committees that I've mentioned. We will look to seek the views of those chairs of the committees in identifying some of the potential challenges or areas of concern for shared services that they think the Shared Services Committee should be considering and looking further at, and those will be brought to the Shared Services Committee for consideration with a view to determining future objectives over the next 12 months. And then there will obviously be a process of reporting the progress against those objectives on a 6 months and 12 months basis. So in terms of the reports that will be received, there will be an object setting report, as I said, which will consider some of those areas, and there will be a progress report every 6 months to the Shared Services Committee, but also will be shared with those existing committees as well, so that they can obviously see where those updates are happening against those areas that they suggested. So yes, that's the process that we're proposing.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't at the workshop, but I understand Alistair chaired it expertly in my absence. He said it was an enjoyable meeting. You can take that as you like it. Thank you for this. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this seems to do a reasonably decent job of getting rid of some of those. Well, do we raise this here, or do we raise it at scrutiny, or do we raise it at audit and governance? That I know has created some tensions in the past. So thank you for the work that you've done on it, and invite members to comment. Councillor Bradley.
Yeah, and again, I think the report summarises what we sort of came up with. It gives us a framework to work against. My only question is around that sort of May-June crossover date with elections, because particularly as we have elections in thirds. How does that roll over? Because you've got May, a briefing note shared with Audit and Governance and Scrutiny Committee chairs and vice chairs, but they may not be appointed till late in May, and then you run into June to do the next stage, which is this grouping. So it's just about timings. I'm just thinking about the timings of that. I think the aspiration is great. It's just if there was an upheaval of, there's a large change in that, you might not have those people in place to actually have those discussions in a coherent manner until later in June. So, and I don't really want to push it to June, July, because then you start getting into the holiday period. It's about, and I'm looking at Chris a little bit here as well, in that how would that work in practice, because when would those meeting dates be to get that timetable ongoing? And I understand the aspiration, but it's very compressed between, for argument's sake, you've got elections on the 5th of May, 4th of May, you've not got your first council meeting till probably the middle of May. Mm-hmm. You've then got a lot to fit in May and June in this space. It's doable, but everything has to work, doesn't it?
Yeah, Chief Exec would like to comment.
I just wonder, actually, just reflecting on it from what Councillor Bradley says, I wonder whether actually there's a practical way, actually, that the people who are going to be the most knowledgeable about issues that might have arisen from a governance audit point of view and from a scrutiny point of view are likely to be the people who've served as chairs for the previous municipal year. So actually we could probably just adjust it to start having some of those conversations with those chairs earlier, and then to have a faster conversation if a new chair is appointed to double check there's nothing entirely different. So I think it's possibly just changing it to come slightly earlier as a conversation.
Okay.
That would work for me.
Yeah, seeing lots of nods around the room, so thank you for that. Anybody else want to comment on this report? Okay, then we're asked to approve the proposed approach as set out in the report. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. So thank you for that. And we'll move on to item 7.
Keep going.
Learned report and sort of like reflecting on the shared services arrangement, which first began in 2008 and then was extended in 2019. It's obviously quite a meaty report, so I'm not going to go through it all, but I think just in terms of some of the lessons learned and reflecting on the approach, obviously we've been quite clear in sort of like focusing on the areas where, you know, savings are most likely to be delivered. So thinking about obviously like some of our back office like functions, and then also as well looking at where it will create that greater resilience. So looking at some of those smaller functions where a larger team would obviously like, you know, sort of like create more capacity and, you know, sort of like support that recruitment and retention of staff. So those are, I suppose, some of the key sort of like lessons learned just in terms of like outcomes. There's obviously been staffing savings to a total of 1.6 million, which has sort of like been delivered really through like the alignment of sort of like terms and conditions and re-looking at sort of like pay grades, but obviously still maintaining that we have a competitive employee benefit package. Also some efficiencies achieved like through service transformation and investment in some specialist services. So in terms of customer services, the introduction of the Capita system to improve like performance around council tax and housing benefit claims. From a digital perspective, we've got the Jadu like website and our CRM systems, which are really helping to sort of like digitise some of those like manual processes and giving our customers a more convenient way to engage with the council from that digital perspective. As I said, we've invested in some specialist skills, so like really building capacity around like data, our events. We've got, you know, really good events like programme and looking at sort of like our tourism and marketing approaches as well. In terms of some of the systems to highlight, we've got the ePloy recruitment system, which has been shortlisted for awards and won awards, and that has really demonstrated like improvement in the application experience and has reduced the time taken to fill vacant posts. We're seeing 90% of our vacancies being filled on the first attempt, which is obviously really good. Obviously, we've introduced the Civica property management system in terms of sort of like managing our assets, and then we've also moved more towards like sort of like hybrid working for our staff, and that allows them to work like flexibly across the different locations, and also it's helping us to think about sort of like how we rationalise like and improve our office space with opportunities for sort of like creating income generation through leasing opportunities. Just in terms of some of the sort of like performance improvements in service delivery, you'll see from the report that's appended reductions in call waiting times like for customers when you look back to sort of like 2022 to where we are now, sort of like reduction from 10 minutes to 3 minutes across the councils. Similarly, we've seen average processing times for council tax support and housing benefit claims being reduced to 3.5 days. We are obviously on track with delivery of our corporate strategy like projects and our business plan projects, and that comes from having a really sort of like embedded approach to project management. We've seen reductions like in the number of external audit improvement recommendations and no significant weaknesses in governance arrangements. What's really noticeable as well is the high levels of staff satisfaction and lower sickness absence rates and outperforming the Lancashire average there. And you know this is down to the quality of like the line management and that staff engagement and the positive culture that we've really spent a lot of time developing and investing in. And then also we've got like improved partnership working through our shared Chorley and South Ribble strategic partnership, and that's delivered some really good outcomes in terms of like a data sharing platform which is helping us to deliver more targeted interventions, as helped in sort of like overseeing like the development of our social prescribing services and rollout of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund programme, and it still continues obviously to identify ways for us to work together, and there's plans for a neighbourhood pilot around tackling economic inactivity. So just some like really sort of like high level outcomes and lessons learned really there to share.
No, and again, thank you for the report. It's really interesting when you get the time to just sit back and look at the process that we've gone through to get here. It does make you reflect on how much we've achieved. I think my reflection on all of this is the change itself and the outcomes seem to be all really positive. It's going through that process of change that's a challenge for our people, and that's what we all need to remember. That change, it's easy to do change, but the culture that you have to go through to make sure that you carry people with you is much more difficult. And I think that's the lesson that we've learned, and I hope we'll apply should the opportunity to come to do any more of this. Anybody else, any comments? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, can I ask Chairman, at the start of this process and during this process of shared services and the development of shared services, one of the continual themes that we picked up from South Ribble was that members were concerned about a Chorley takeover. So the question is for members from South Ribble, is that fear still exist, or are we all quite happy now that it was a good thing?
I don't know if I'd use the word everyone's quite happy, and I think that culture and mindset over time is diminishing. It is diminishing. It's not helped by officers who can't cut and paste and take Chorley out of council minutes when it should say South Ribble. But that's oh yeah, I'm sure it happens the other way as well. But I think over time it is something that is diminishing. I think clearly at the beginning of this process, it was felt by many people in this building that a lot of the senior appointments were going to people who came from Chorley. Now that wasn't because, I'm confident that wasn't because of any favouritism or undue processes. That was the fact that, you know, jobs were advertised, restructures happened, and in the main, at the beginning, it was people who were working for Chorley who were getting what was seen as the plum jobs. But over time, I mean, there are people now sat in this room who, you know, never worked for Chorley or South Ribble, have always worked for Chorley and South Ribble, and that will continue over time to become more of the norm, I guess. Good question, though. Thanks. Councillor Brown.
Where we're potentially going.
So speaking of happiness, the last staff survey was done in July 24. I'm just wondering if there's plans to, if it's worth doing that again now, given where we are, or are we deciding that was around the actual transformation and the change, and as it had increased to about 76%, we're not doing it anymore. I just wonder what the plan is for that.
I mean, it's interesting that in shared services, it seems to be a bit happy. People seem to be happier, if I can use the word that you use there. It's an interesting point whether we want to do another one where we are. But I'm happy to take that away and discuss it with South Ribble Cabinet and give that some real serious consideration. Thank you for raising it. Alistair?
I think there potentially is, given that if we are going to be heading towards an LGR arrangement, just to know where our own staff are at, because some of that unhappiness might be around about not knowing where they're going to be in 18 months, 2 years. So there is a question around that's about timing, and also then drilling out what their fears are and their concerns are, perhaps about the future, as part of something we can maybe do to take that into account as we go through any process. That might be a purpose. That's not exactly what we'd normally do, which is how happy you are in your job, how happy you know where you're going and all that, because it's very uncertain to ask that at the minute. But if, you know, create scenarios where if we move into this scenario, what would your priorities be or your concerns be, to highlight some of those so we can deal with them at that point in time. because what I would hate to do as part of any change would be to lose or to, you know, good people, because the problem we have as a councils is we are very close to areas that are not going to go into reorganisation, i.e. Liverpool and Manchester, and therefore it's quite easy for them to switch over. So therefore, if they're not happy and they don't want to go through the change and all that, so I think that might be a purpose to doing some of that work. Michelle?
Yeah. Councillor Mrs Walton. Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Caroline, for an interesting report. I enjoyed reading it, and I think that some of the lessons learned have perhaps been about staff morale and everything, and perhaps with hindsight, as hindsight's a very good thing, that perhaps things would have been done a little bit slower or a little bit, because I think some of the services that were taken on from 2019 to 2022 were introduced very, very quickly, and I think it upset the whole system, if you know what I mean. But we've learnt our lessons, and that's not the same. It was just a point of clarification, really. On page 24 of the agenda, it says on item 16, annual staffing savings of 1.6 million. Then on page 40 in the finance and governance item, it says 1.6 million in annual staffing savings. But in this report on page 31, it just says 1.6 million in staffing savings. So could you just clarify, is that annual staffing savings of 1.6 million or the overall savings that we've done through shared services? Because it contradicts itself.
The Chief Exec wanted to come in anyway, so this seems to be an appropriate time to bring him in.
Thanks. I think that actually the 1.6 is the totality of the savings, but it is on an annual basis because it is taken out of the revenue budget, which is why it gets difficult as time passes.
I just wanted it
because we just rebase it. But I think it's the totality. I don't think that's just staffing, because that would be a very considerable staffing saving against our original staffing budget. But it is an ongoing saving. It is baked into the council's budget. Yeah. Just going back to Councillor Brown's question and follow-up points from the leaders, generally we would do a staff survey about once every 2 years as a whole thing, as a whole organisation. We did do far more regular pulse surveys of people who were going through change in shared services. As we're not implementing more shared services in the same way, actually, in the end, staff were saying to us, will you stop asking us how we are? But we would be due to do a full staff survey in 2026. The points that Matthew and Alistair made are the ones that we as senior officers are also considering. How do we put that in the context of local government reorganisation? We did do a staff survey around local government reorganisation alongside other councils across Lancashire in August, September time last year. Broadly came out positive, that people knew what was going on, were a bit nervous about it, but were content that they were kept up to date. So I think there's arguments in either direction, but to be honest, understanding how people are feeling is probably always a useful thing.
Okay, thank you for raising that, and please be assured it's something that we'll consider. Councillor Roberts.
Thanks, Councillor Thomason. I just wanted to ask a quick question about the people strategy. I saw that it would kind of come to an end, 2022-25 strategy. It's been refreshed this year. Just wondered if officers could say a little bit more about kind of the timescales of when it's going to be refreshed this year, and then kind of that horizon scanning of kind of skill gaps going into thinking about LGR on the horizon and things like that, just so you know, ultimately our staff are going to get us to where we need to be to prepare properly.
It's probably be both. Now looking at each other slightly, so we're already on with it. We've already basically got drafts of it. A lot of the people strategy will actually remain the same, because many of the things that we introduced through the first people strategy have been very successful in improving staff engagement and culture. One of the big bits for this forthcoming people strategy will be about workforce planning. That's workforce planning going into local government reorganisation, but also in our workforce we have pockets of an older workforce. So we have pockets where there are some services where the average age is actually at or above retirement age, certainly kind of early retirement age, and we need to start planning for that so that we can know where we need to be bringing in new people, or particularly in those areas where it's specialist skills where people need that training. Now you can see that we have been doing it, not always on an entirely smooth road in places like building control and planning enforcement, but trying to get that conveyor belt of people coming in, being trained up and able to replace if people either move on because the market means that they move on, they're offered more expansive salaries than we can offer, or because they're retiring. That is very likely to be a confused picture in the next 18 months because from what we understand at the moment from talking to people, some people are waiting for local government reorganisation to see what happens. Other people don't want to be in local government reorganisation, so are thinking about trying to leave sooner than they otherwise would. And because we don't actually know what the model of local government reorganisation will be yet, there's a lot of people that are also waiting for that. So a lot of the people strategy will be about trying to have some of those structured conversations so that we understand the picture across the whole organisation, but in particular teams as well.
Councillor Mrs Smith.
Thank you. On a completely different tack, if I may. On page
As long as it's about this report.
It is. I'm going to get it. It is on page 26, so you know where I am. It talks about rollout of furniture designed to support a modern and flexible workplace, including lockers to store personal belongings away, breakout desks and open space, informal meetings. I'm just wondering, building on what, going on from what Mr. Sinner's just said, about an older workforce, and we have an awful lot of staff who have been here quite a number of years. I'm just wondering how that has all gone down. Are people happy with it, or are you finding resistance? And certainly about these informal meeting areas and breakout spaces and things like that.
They're basically nice seating areas, so actually it's now more of a competition, particularly in this building where we've done more than we've done over in Chorley at the moment. The space on the third floor that was called White Space has been completed. There's now more competition for people to get in there than into pre-existing office spaces, because actually some of it was probably long sought for. Informal meetings are the place where there is only so many meeting rooms you can have in one building, and so the ability to move away from a desk to have a conversation is something that has been very gratefully received. So yeah, it's probably one of our busiest offices in terms of people will actively seek out to go and sit in there. There was definitely nervousness before it happened, but once people saw it, they were quite pleased, I think.
Just to add on that as well, I think it's the engagement that we've had with staff, like through the process of, you know, implementing those improvements, where they've actually had a say in, you know, the look, the feel, what they need, like in terms of like the working environment, which I think has really helped in obviously them embracing that change and you know, welcoming the improvement. So yeah, I think we're quite good at having those conversations.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. On the same principle of interior design, fit out, and lessons learned, could the leader of the Chorley Council and the chief executive please take note of what a quality coat of arms designed and produced looks like in a council chamber, rather than the monstrosity which currently hangs in Chorley Town Hall?
Off agenda, Chair. Gosh, yeah, slightly off agenda, and not entirely supported. No
business into the shared services environment.
This is the Shared Services Committee, and we'll try and keep it on shared services if at all possible. Get off. Get off.
They stole that from somewhere.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor France, and then I'll. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just thinking again about the staff satisfaction. Do you think the staff that are working in shared services are more confident moving forwards with local government reorganisation, because as they are working across two sites already, two councils already, do you think that gives them more confidence and perhaps more job security perhaps moving forward to the ones who aren't in shared services? And if so, is that a reason why we need to have our eyes open to any further opportunities to allow you know, other departments to maybe start to move in that direction? Thanks.
Now you're inviting me to get involved in conjecture, aren't you? Because the only true answer is I don't know. But I get the point that you're making, and I would think if you were working already for Chorley and South Ribble, you would tend to be less concerned about the fact that you might end up working for Chorley, South Ribble and West Lancs. I think that's a point. And it might even be a question.
It won't be called.
No, we're going to call it South Ribble, we've already decided. Because it's all going to be south of the Ribble, so it makes perfect sense. No, the Chief Exec.
And just to be clear, there are different views held by different people because different people have different perspectives on it. The feedback that we get from staff is actually, it's not just those who are already shared, it's people who work within the organisation. And in part, that's because you're part of a bigger thing, and so it doesn't feel like you're likely to be swallowed up into a larger entity in the same way. But it is also because some of that more challenging change that people have gone through or seen the organisations go through in the last 5 years is very much what people know is going to need to happen as part of local government reorganisation. And if you've done it before, it's not quite as scary. So, like I say, different people will have different perspectives, but I think a lot of people who work within the two councils feel that this is something they can take on because actually it's somewhere they've been before.
Okay, Councillor Smith, who's here as an observer, has indicated he wants to speak, but I'll give the committee members the last chance before I bring him in. No one else from the committee. Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I couldn't let what Peter Wilson said, Councillor Wilson, with regard to the Chorley takeover go without actually commenting just a few words. In fact, I won't comment too much because I think you summed it up quite well, Chair, and I think that has probably gone by the board now. We do work together very well. In fact, we've always worked together very well. I mean, Peter and I and Alistair, I mean, I've been around obviously since the whole of the shared services started in 2008 and before that when it was being planned in 2007. But yeah, it's made some significant progress. Just going on from there with regard to successes and lessons learned, again, it's been mentioned, and there's plenty of paper there highlighting the successes, and they are significant, and I'm not underestimating those, they are significant. But the lessons learned, which are just as important really in lots and lots of ways, going on to the future and whatever the future might hold for us, it actually doesn't highlight where lessons are learnt, and we know what they are because we've discussed them in the past, and most of them are about going headlong into something before we've done proper due diligence and that sort of thing. I just wonder if there's anything specific that the officers would think with regard to that that maybe should be highlighted more in the report itself. Thank you, Chair.
I'm looking round.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Okay.
I mean, much has been discussed over the last few years at this committee. I think there are lessons learned which actually were learned and then implemented in reviews as we went through. That includes some of the really basic stuff. So some of the things around trying to make sure that we're clearly demonstrating to both councils that we're working to do sovereign councils. I think there were elements occasionally where we didn't and continue to sometimes not get that quite right. In terms of staff management and support, again, we changed how and we changed our change policy on the back of some of the changes that we made to increase the amount of engagement that we do early in the process, to increase the amount of involvement that the trade union has in supporting people going through change, and then also in how we prioritise it. I think there are different views about the speed at which and the benefits and disadvantages of the speed or pace that you go at through any change, but I think that what we probably could do better, and again I think we've got better at, is communicating when we set out and say we're going to do this big chunk, how that big chunk is going to be split down. And I think some of those elements that Councillor Walton referred to was because the committee had identified a phase 1 and a phase 2, and they were very big phases. Now, once we got beyond that, we've been far more specific about individual services, which has provided the space for staff and councillors to engage at that level.
Okay, I think perfect valid question. and we've heard the response. It's all been a process of learning. I think clearly any change we're going to go through now, we're in a better place to put that change through, aren't we?
Yeah, I think also it's some of the services we've gone into, we've done it because there's been a perceived problem, and we've gone at it, to quote you, headlong or whatever the wording was, because it's needed to be sorted out quickly. It's always better if you can do things in a planned and coherent manner, I think, and that's a bit what Chris has referred to, and a bit, it's about, I think that's a lesson for going into any LGR, is the more time you have to plan it and the more you have time to think about it and do it properly, is always going to be better, isn't it? The very real risk is that we're not allowed that time by others and by the circumstances and all the rest of it. But you think we've learned some lessons, there's other parts of Lancashire that have learned no lessons because they've not been through that processing whatsoever, so they're going to have a real shock to their system. So I think it's been good preparation for us, but I think we've, as Chris pointed out and as Matt said, we've learned some lessons about perhaps how to do it and how not to do it, and I think that will stand us in good stead, whatever is coming down the line.
Great, and that feels like a really positive. I was just going to end the meeting, Councillor Smith. If you've not got anything positive to say, I'm not going to let you speak.
Chair,
Have you got something
I've said
positive
enough
to say?
positive about it. As I say, I've been here from day one with it. No, thank you, Chair, for your summing up of that and Alistair as well. It hasn't always been a smooth road, but I mean, nevertheless, we did sort it out, and we did have to revisit a few things. But talking about the rocky roads ahead that we don't know where we're going, those lessons learnt will be more and more important. Thank you.
Thank you. So we thank you for the report. The report's noted, and I think that's it for this evening. So thank you everybody for your attendance. And we'll finish on a high. Thank you everybody.